The 5 new types of diabetes, explained. Diabetes just got a little more complicated, or clearer, depending on your perspective. Researchers in Scandinavia have proposed classifying diabetes as 5 types of disease, rather than 2 types, according to a new study. Cluster 1, called severe autoimmune diabetes. This form is similar to type 1 diabetes. People in this cluster were relatively young when they were diagnosed, and they were not overweight. They had an immune system, autoimmune, disease that prevented them from producing insulin. Cluster 2, called severe insulin-deficient diabetes. This form was similar to Cluster 1. People were relatively young at diagnosis and were not overweight. They were also not producing much insulin, but, crucially, their immune system was not the cause of their disease. People in this cluster looked for all the world like they had type 1 diabetes, but they didn't have autoantibodies that indicate type 1, Wine said. Cluster 3, called severe insulin-resistant diabetes. This form occurred in people who were overweight and had high insulin resistance, meaning their bodies were making insulin, but their cells were not responding to it. Cluster 4, called mild obesity-related diabetes. This form occurred in people who had a milder form of the disease, without as many metabolic problems as those in Cluster 3, and they tended to be obese. Cluster 5, called mild age-related diabetes. This form was similar to Cluster 4, but the people were older at their age of diagnosis. This was the most common form of diabetes, affecting about 40% of people in the study.